everyone, my name is Sarah, and today we're going to be learning about the science behind one of Korea's most exciting military adventures, and that is the Panokseon ship. So I actually did not know a whole lot about this incident and the ships that were involved before I read this article, so I'm very, very excited to share what I learned with you today. Alright, are you guys ready? Let's start. When the Japanese invasion of Joseon in 1592 is mentioned, Admiral Lee Sun-shin is certain to be mentioned. His strategic mindset aided immensely in defeating the Japanese Navy, but Joseon's oar and sail propelled ship, named Panokseon, was an even larger key. So this is very interesting information. I definitely knew about Lee Sun-shin and I knew about his turtle ships, but I did not know about the Panokseon, or the oar and sail propelled ships. So Lee Sun-shin, as I mentioned in the article, he's certain to be mentioned when you're talking about Korean military history, especially this particular time period. And when someone is certain to be mentioned, it means it's 100%, almost definitely, 무조건, it's going to come out and be mentioned. So you can use this expression, certain to be blank, or certain to blank, in a lot of different situations in English. So 뭐뭐 무조건 될 거다 or 할 거다 할 때, you can use this expression, certain to be. Alright? And so why is Lee Sun-shin so famous? Why is he certain to be mentioned every single time that we talk about Korean military history? Well, his strategic mindset is very famous. So this word here, strategic, is the adjective form of the word strategy, or 전략 in Korean. So because he had this strategic mindset, or 전략적인 mindset, it aided or helped immensely in defeating the Japanese Navy. So it's really, really important that we had this amazing naval general, Lee Sun-shin, but even with the best generals in the world, if they don't have any weapons, if they don't have any tools, it's really, really difficult for them to fight, especially when you're fighting against the Japanese in a naval war. So that's why Joseon's oar and sail propelled ships were such a large key factor in the victory of the Joseon Navy during this time. So we can take a look at one of these photos. We can see this part of the boat right here, the fabric that catches the wind, that's called the sail. And when you're rowing a boat like this, there's usually, it's kind of like a really long spoon. That's called an oar. So you use the oar and the sail in order to move the ship. So I didn't actually know that this sort of ship existed during this time period. I thought Korea was mostly fighting with the turtle ships, but yeah, I thought it was very, very interesting. All right, next sentence. The main reason historians believe that the Panokseon was superior to Japanese ships is because it was a 3-story high ship built on a single deck. Historians say Japanese soldiers were not able to cross into it and fight on board with swords and spears. So back then, Japan, they had like the samurai, and they were pretty good at fighting at hand-to-hand combat and using swords, but if this ship doesn't even allow them to get on and fight with you, there's not so much they can do, right? So the way that they were able to kind of avoid confrontation with these Japanese soldiers was simply by raising the deck or the floor of the ship super, super high, so the Japanese couldn't even get on. So that's very interesting, I think. And for this reason, Panokseon was considered to be superior, or 우월하다, to Japanese ships. So very interesting for sure. The high position of the artillery was quite advantageous for artillery attacks. So have you guys ever watched Star Wars by chance? Well, there's a really, really famous part in, I think it's, I want to say the 3rd Star Wars movie, and you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below. There's like too many of these movies now, it's like 12. Okay, so have any of you guys seen the movie Star Wars? Okay, very cool. So there's a really famous scene in one of the Star Wars movies. I think it's the 3rd one. I'm not actually sure. So basically, Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is a character in the movies, he tells this guy, Anakin, "It's over, Anakin, I have the higher ground." And basically, in that situation, he's trying to say, I'm literally physically above you. So when you're physically above someone, it's much easier to attack them, right? Because you have gravity on your side, and you can also see your enemy and also your surroundings much better. When you're down below, it's very hard to see what it is that you're doing, and then also you don't have gravity on your side. So for this reason, it was very advantageous, or 유익하다, to have the artillery on the top of the ship too high for the Japanese to be able to, shoot at very easily. So artillery is actually, it's still a word that is used to describe military combat today. And it means, so the artillery people, they're the ones who are shooting some kind of projectile at the enemy. So at the time, it was probably arrows, but also in wars that are fought today, artillery are the people who are shooting guns, so still projecting artillery. It's a little bit different, but yes, they're still called artillery to this day. And this word is a little bit difficult to pronounce, so I recommend that you try practicing along at home. Artillery. Artillery. All right, you got it. So yes, because the ship was 3 stories tall, it was very, very high above the sea level, it was advantageous to have for these artillery attacks. And in addition, it could easily fit various types of gunpowder, ranging from small size to large size cannons, and operate them in a stable manner. So I think I did a video about fireworks last week. I believe it was actually for junior, but if you want to, you can still watch the video. You can still maybe learn something about fireworks. But basically, gunpowder is the kind of like the karu that goes inside of a firework or inside of a gun, and it creates the small explosion that makes the bullet fly out of the gun and, attack whoever it is that you're fighting with. And because the ship was super high, it made it a lot easier to fit small size and large size cannons and also operate them in a stable manner. So if you're on a ship, you're moving around, right? Like kind of like this, and then people are shooting things at you, and then maybe there are people fighting with swords next. So it's very difficult to operate a cannon in that sort of situation. You're like, trying not to get shot. But because the cannons were on top of the ship and very, very high above the water, it was difficult for the Japanese down below to attack them, and also there were no people sword fighting usually right next to them. In other words, its structure was designed to be suitable for thermal warfare. Furthermore, Panokseon had a flat bottom. This was an unfavorable structure for the ship to move forward. So the first word that I have highlighted here is thermal warfare. So this is actually not a very common phrase in English, so you don't really have to memorize it. But just in case you want to know what it is in this context, it's basically warfare that is fought with thermal weapons, or weapons that use some kind of heat in order to operate. So this can either literally mean, burning down your enemy's house or their fort, but it can also refer to weapons like guns, or I guess these early gunpowder contraptions that use a little bit of heat in order to set off a cannon or something like that. However, because the Panokseon had a flat bottom, it was unfavorable for the ship to move forward. So when you think, okay, so how many of you guys seen the movie Titanic? Right, so when you're looking at the boat above the water, it kind of looks flat because the surface of the water is going to be flat. But actually, if you look underneath, it's usually shaped kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like a cone or like an eyeball, if that makes any sense. Not the actual ball, but kind of like an American football. So it's like pointy towards the front, and then it curves towards the back like this. And this is because it's more streamlined and it makes it more easy and efficient to move forward. But because the Panokseon had a flat bottom, it was unfavorable for the ship to move forward. So how did that work? Therefore, the ship was mainly used in coastal and inland rivers rather than the sea. Experts say the structure was intentionally chosen to fit Korea's unique maritime environment. So if you want to take these ships and send them really far across the sea, that would be pretty difficult to do because they move really, really slowly. So instead of sending them out into the ocean, typically they were used in coastal and inland rivers. So coastal is something that's right around the edge of the land, so between the land and the water. Usually there's a pretty shallow area when you first walk into the water. It's called the coast. So inland rivers, that is exactly what it sounds like. It's in the land, or 내륙 river. So it's inside of the country. So that way the ships don't actually have to move around a whole lot because they're not so good at that. And so the experts say that the structure was intentionally, or not by accident, on purpose, chosen to fit Korea's unique maritime environment. So maritime, that means having to do with the ocean. Thanks to this structure, Korean soldiers could endure sea changes or strong waves in the West Sea, where the difference between tidal flats is large. On the other hand, the Japanese ships could carry only 1 or 2 cannons, and soldiers fought mainly with their guns. So that's very interesting. So because the Koreans, they made these ships and designed their weapons in order to fit their own geographical and maritime landscape, it was able to defend itself better. But because the Japanese ships only carried 1 or 2 cannons, and their soldiers mainly fought with guns, this made it pretty difficult for them to fight with Koreans because they couldn't even get on the ships in the first place, let alone attack them. Their ships couldn't carry enough cannons because they could not withstand the rebound of them, which is why Japan couldn't conquer the peninsula even with their well-trained soldiers. So this word right here, rebound. So have any of you guys ever gone to a shooting range? Or I think 사격장? I think that's how you say it in Korean. So if you guys have ever shot a gun or seen someone shoot a gun on TV, it's not like you just shoot it like this and then bam, nothing happens. Usually it's a little miniature explosion inside of the thing that you're holding. So typically when you shoot the gun, it kind of goes like this backwards, and that's why it's able to shoot the projectile out into the air. Same thing with cannons. Cannons are basically just giant guns, if you think about it. So it's pretty difficult to have a whole lot of cannons on a ship, because if the ship is constantly, being pressured downwards when the cannons are shooting these giant balls into the air, it's actually pretty difficult to make ships that can withstand that kind of pressure. So for this reason, Japan could not conquer the peninsula even with their well-trained soldiers. Alright, well that is all for this week. I hope that you guys enjoyed this lesson about the Panokseon. I certainly did. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, make sure to let us know in the comment section below. Alright, well I hope that all of you have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys again next week. Alright, bye!